So this morning I have a video, and the video is basically a message that I got from Our Lady yesterday in prayer related to her suffering. And of course, yesterday it was the feast of Our Lady's Seven Sorrows. Now, before sharing this video, I'm kind of aware that some people don't like videos when they hear about Jesus suffering or Mary suffering, and often I hear kind of derogatory comments like, oh, God can look after himself, or Our Lady's a big girl, or should they don't need us. In other words, laughing, mocking, cynicism, kind of what's that got to do with us? And sometimes that can be very, very painful because it has a lot to do with us because Our Lady is with us, and actually it's us that are causing her actually the suffering, and her suffering is real, is tangible, and we are actually in the position to help her and actually to alleviate it and to reduce it and to make her smile. But then, in order to do that, we need to change our lives. We need to take her message and call to conversion seriously. And that's where a lot of people are not willing to go that extra mile. So it's easy then to laugh it off and say, oh, Our Lady can look after herself. She'll be right. And on I go my day. And that is very, very sad. I'd also say that when Our Lady gives these messages, I also get inner visions of Our Lady as I'm getting the message, and she is absolutely full of love, honesty, truth, integrity, simplicity, care, understanding, compassion, and she's only correcting us because she knows that God genuinely has something better for us. Our Lady is not by any means a spoiled sport that wants to rob our joy or fun. It's the opposite. She wants us to be full of true joy and to discover the joy of knowing Jesus, but the joy of who we really are, and the joy of love, the joy actually of living a life of love, a life of integrity. And also, of course, the joy of getting to heaven one day. And she wants that for us, and she wants that for all the people around us. And so, in the context of that Our Lady at times is so, so sad, because she sees, number one, all that we are missing out on, but number two, she sees all that the other people are missing out on through maybe our bad example or through things that we are doing. And she sees also the eternal, the long-term consequences on this behavior, which ultimately, if we don't turn to God, could lead to hell or could lead to a long time in purgatory or whatever. So it's in this context that Our Lady is sorrowful, and it's also within our power to turn to Our Lady, to turn our hearts to conversion, and to change all her sorrows into joy. So she's not permanently sorrowful, we can make her smile too, and so we should bear that in mind. So here goes. My children, today you remember my seven sorrows, each so infinitely connected to my love for Jesus and his ultimate sacrifice on the cross for us, his children. Yet, my children, these same seven sorrows continue to pierce my motherly heart today, and so very many of you wound my motherly heart without a second thought. 1. The prophecy of Simeon and Anna. My children, my heart will be pierced with sorrow until the very end of the world, when all the suffering shall end. Number 2. My flight into Egypt with Jesus to escape from danger. How very many of you, when faced with danger, simply abandon Jesus and your faith, instead of making the necessary sacrifices, thus rendering your faith void and your prayers mere lip service. Number 3. The loss of the child Jesus. So very many of you now rear your children with little or no faith, with no idea of sin or understanding of prayer. You are rearing orphans. Number 4. The condemnation of Jesus to death. Every time you suffer because of your faith, my children, I suffer with you, and some suffer the death of martyrdom. Number 5. The crucifixion of Jesus. My children, although Jesus is crucified in thousands of ways, no other sin hurts my motherly heart more than abortion, where innocent babies suffer the most gruesome of deaths and agonizing pain. Number 6. The retrieval of Jesus' body. To see my son ignored and abandoned in churches all over the world, even by his chosen priests, breaks my motherly heart over and over. Number 7. The burial of Jesus. More and more people all over the world are dying, while not having prayed or turned to God during their lives. And so very many souls are choosing to refuse God's mercy, even at death, and so face eternal damnation. My children, I love you infinitely, but you must be aware of the truth. You live in a battlefield and not a playground, and you must learn to fight through the weapons of prayer, mercy, truth, and justice by living both moral and prayerful lives without ever compromising, no matter what cost. Powerful. I think that last line, my children, you live in a battleground and not a playground. And how many people sort of treat planet Earth like you only live once, enjoy life. And that, of course, is the message that a lot of people have, but yet life isn't about enjoying it. Yes, there's great enjoyment in life when we follow Jesus, when we follow God, when we live a holy life. But enjoyment in itself isn't the purpose of life. The purpose of life really is to get to heaven, is to be with Jesus, is to do God's will. And Jesus showed us that ultimately himself, when even though he had the most beautiful mother, the most beautiful foster father, Joseph as well, and yet he gave his life to preaching, to teaching, and ultimately to dying on the cross. And that's what gave him the joy of doing the Father's will. And so Our Lady's 7 sorrows, we'll just go through them quickly. The first one was the prophecy that Simeon and Anna made when Our Lady came to the temple with the child Jesus, and they prophesied that a sword would pierce her heart. Of course, we know that that was the death of Jesus. But what she's saying is that that sword pierced her heart back then, and will continue to pierce her heart till the end of the world, when all suffering shall end. Because it's only at the end of the world, when there are no more souls, so to speak, new souls, and everyone, all the harvest is brought in, so to speak, that there'll be no more suffering. But up to that point, Our Lady's heart is pierced for love and pierced for the conversion and the repentance of her children. Number 2 is the flight into Egypt. So just after the birth of Jesus, St. Joseph received a dream that the child Jesus was in danger, and so they had to fly into Egypt, into a foreign country, not knowing where they were going, knowing that all these babies were being killed back in their home country. And yet she's saying that nowadays, so many people are faced with dangers, are faced with basically problems to do with their faith, and instead of flying into Egypt, so to speak, they abandon their faith. And sometimes, of course, it's not as dramatic as having to leave your country because of your faith, but sometimes it could be a job situation, a work situation, a sinful situation, a friendship situation. It could be something you have to walk out of. It could be something you have to leave. It could be something you have to say in public. And what she's saying is so many people abandon Jesus. And that makes her very, very sad, because when you do that, or when we do that, we walk away from Jesus. We walk away from the faith. And Mary, I suppose, who paid the ultimate sacrifice, who made enormous sacrifices, is telling us we can't follow Jesus and not be ready to make sacrifices. And so when she sees people opting for the easy road, she gets sad, because it's not an easy road. And people say, oh, God would understand. Well, yes, he'll understand the same way as Jesus understood why Peter betrayed him 3 times. But he was still grieved by it, and still Peter had to come back and ultimately get back on the horse and give his life to Jesus. And ultimately Peter did suffer martyrdom. Of course, we're not saying we're going to suffer martyrdom, but ultimately there's no escaping. When we run away, we're going to have to come back someday or the other. Number 3, the loss of the child Jesus. Well, this is, of course, when Jesus was lost in the temple. But she says, so many of you now rear your children with little or no faith, with no idea of sin or prayer, and you are rearing orphans. So how sad Our Lady is when children are reared with no clue about what a sin is, no clue about what Mass is, no clue about how to go to confession, no clue about how to pray, how to live a prayerful life, how to avoid sin, what to do. How sad Our Lady is. What hope have these children? And sometimes we get sad when we see maybe underprivileged children in India or Africa or something that don't have an education and that are undernourished, and we sort of think, oh, what a pity. If they were educated, he could be a doctor, he could be an engineer. Well, Our Lady couldn't care less if you're a doctor or you're an engineer, but she could care less if you've become a saint And so when Our Lady sees so many children not being educated, not being taught how to pray, not being taught about the road to heaven, she gets so sad, because she sees that these children are being set up for a fall. And she says, you are rearing orphans. What a powerful statement. You are rearing orphans. Number 4, the condemnation of Jesus to death. Well, then she says that she suffers every time that we suffer because of our faith. She suffers with us. And some people in today's world still are condemned to death. Not in our country so much, but in other countries. And she suffers with them. And when she sees those injustices and those horrendous agonies those people go through, she is suffering. But she's also suffering with us. Every time we speak out for our faith and someone says, oh, your man, he's a religious nut, or he's a mental case, or he's crazy, or he's mad, or he's off the wall, or he's a fanatic, or all that, she suffers with us. She understands. Number 5, the crucifixion of Jesus. Well, this is Jesus dying on the cross. I could really feel her pain as she was telling me this one, how much Our Lady suffers through the sin of abortion. Jesus dying on the cross, and those little babies being mutilated, being tortured, and feeling the pain, suffer the most gruesome of deaths and agonizing pain. And these little souls feel the pain. They feel the pain in their bodies. It's not because they're small, they don't feel the pain. Little babies feel pain just as much as grown adults. It has nothing to do with size. They feel the pain. So imagine the agonizing pain they feel, and that grieves the heart of Our Lady immensely, and immensely more than we can imagine, because she is totally aware of how much pain they feel. We can kind of at times, gloss it over and say, oh, it mustn't be that bad, and it's probably over pretty quickly, and blah, 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 blah. No, Our Lady knows exactly what it's like, and she wouldn't be in agony about it if it wasn't very, very, very gruesome and very severe. Number 6, the retrieval of Jesus' body. So when Jesus is taken down off the cross, and you can imagine Jesus' beautiful and yet mutilated body in her arms, and how much she loves Jesus. And yet she's saying that to see Jesus abandoned in churches all over the world, by his, especially, not just, but especially by priests, breaks her motherly heart. Why? Because she knows that Jesus who died and who she held afterwards in her arms, that the body of Jesus is present in our tabernacles, in our churches, and so many people walk right by. If you go into a regular Catholic church all over the world, usually they're empty. You might find 1 or 2 people, and that's about it. Yet if you were to walk down the road and find the local pub, the local coffee shop, or the local supermarket, you'll find the place is full. And she's not always asking us to spend hours there, but the power of 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, half an hour when we can, makes all the difference. And especially even when to do with our priests. Priests, of course, have been given a special vocation, a special calling to bringing people to the Eucharist and to repairing for other people's sins as well, through prayer, through fasting, through Mass, through the sacraments. And when priests aren't praying, when priests aren't crazy about the Eucharist, if you like, number 1, she suffers because she knows that they're abandoning Jesus, so to speak, and also she suffers because it's a bad example. If people see priests that are not living holy lives, well, then everything falls down. And finally, then, it's the burial of Jesus, when Jesus was put in that tomb. And then she says, more and more people all over the world are dying while not having prayed or turned to God during their lives. In other language, we might say people are dying not in a state of grace. But she doesn't say that. She says it, dying while not having prayed or turned to God. But in any case, it's the same idea, it's the same thing. And basically what she's saying is that there's so many souls that have spent basically 50, 60, 70 years maybe living down here, have never said a prayer, have lived total hedonist lifestyles at times, and even on their deathbed, they refuse God's mercy, and so many souls are choosing damnation. And that makes her infinitely sad as well, because these souls are loved by her too, and there's not a single soul that God doesn't love. But the only thing is, he respects our free will so much. But just because he respects our free will doesn't mean inside that that he's not, and Our Lady is not very, very, very sad. And so I'm going to finish on that. I love you infinitely, but you must be aware of the truth. You live in a battlefield and not a playground, and you must learn to fight. So the weapons of prayer, mercy, truth, and justice, by living both moral and prayerful lives without ever compromising, no matter what cost. So, in other words, the best way of pleasing Our Lady is living a life of prayer, but also a moral life, and teaching other people to do the same through words, through actions, and through example. And with all that, of course, none of us are perfect. We're all on a journey, and that's why Our Lady in Medjugorje is constantly calling us to conversion, to regular prayer, daily mass, if we can, confession, rosary, adoration, all these things, because we are in a battle, and even we're doing well in a battlefield. You're going to take a couple of bullets at times, you're going to get a couple of punches at times, and so you need to continue on the journey of holiness. So it's not about being perfect by any means, but it's about being on the road to perfection and not being blasé about it, but doing all that we can to basically, keep our own souls clean and in a state of holiness and grace, and then do all we can as well to help others to do the same and to bring people to the truth of knowing Jesus, but also to the truth of living moral and prayerful lives. And it's not just about loving Jesus, but it's also about actions speak louder than words. It's also about living lives of integrity, living lives of prayer, and living lives that are in line with the gospel. So anyway, so on that note, thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Let us continue to love Our Lady. Let's especially continue to listen to Our Lady, her call to prayer, her call to repentance, also knowing that there is enormous joy. There is enormous joy and far greater joy in knowing Jesus and Mary than in lifestyles and lives of sin. So on that note, let us give our hearts to Our Lady, and let us bring all the people in our hearts to Our Lady too, knowing that she can use our prayers, and she is using our prayers to bring other people as well. Thank you for watching.